Order, declarations of conflict of interest. I think we have one from Councillor Ramsey under
C.
18 Trainer Street.
Yes, I do.
And the reason for the conflict, you just have to state it.
I have a family member that is working for that company.
And councillors, because we don't have the mics on our desk anymore, when you do speak, let's go back to standing and speaking so that they can clearly transmit it to the mics there, and it avoids individuals from rolling papers and so forth. So, and we'll take a note of who's speaking. So when anyone's speaking, he stands or she stands, has the floor. Okay? Just makes there's some transmission issues with the mics now in the center of the floor. Okay, approval of agenda. There are 4 items, A, B, C, and D. Motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Ramsey, second by Councillor Duffy. All those in favor? Okay. Councillor Drawn, you're in favor?
In favor.
Okay. Can you just turn it up a little bit, sir?
Your Worship.
Yes?
What's the agenda for the in-camera?
It's, do you have your, just go to your digital mail. It's the 402, it was sent at 402
So what's on?
under Tracy McLean.
Okay.
There's only one item.
Is it fine?
Yes,
No.
yes.
Okay.
That, you can bring that up when it goes to closed session.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, let's, Mr. Kelly, do you want to read the first resolution with Mr. McEwen here?
Yes, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Drawn, second by Deputy Mayor Cody, whereas the City of Charlottetown awarded the tender for Milton Vale Wellfield Phase 3 Communications Systems in the amount of $1,434,782.61 plus HST on September 9th, 2019. Therefore, be it resolved that the contract value be increased by $216,006.34 plus HST to cover the costs associated with the construction of the communications tower.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, just getting a message from the lobby that the camera's not working.
It may be something on the TV because it's saying that the connection is excellent. Streaming.
Yeah, they said the audio, they can hear the audio, they just can't see the video.
Okay, we're just going to do a technical checkup. Is Rory in the other room? Do you see it on the monitor? She sees it.
Don't kill the messenger. The message I'm getting from people up there says I can't see it.
Technology is wonderful when it works.
Yes, he's just checking it. Mr. Kelly checking the monitor right there. Maybe it's not, huh? Yeah, all it do is turn it on. Good, sir? There's something wrong?
Yeah, there's no screen. You were downstairs or upstairs? Downstairs.
We just have to technical difficulties. It's the world we're living in. Live stream,
It is being live streamed.
but it's not projecting on the 2 monitors, one up here, but they're residents up there.
You make faces at it.
On the screen here.
Can you get it now, Greg? Councilor Rivera?
What?
Is it showing up in yours?
I'm not watching it. But Wayne sent a message to me from the
It's obviously
lobby
an issue with the TV.
to say
Yeah, I
that
think
he
it
can't
is.
see it, but he can hear it.
What's your buddy, is it?
Wayne is a very good reporter. And old buddy back in the day.
I can just come in here and sit down.
Western.
Sit in the house. Good, sir?
That's okay for now. But there's no picture, but he's okay.
Is he? Does he want to sit at the side of the chamber?
They're going to check the phone.
Can you sit up beside the chamber? Yeah. Oh, bring them up to the chamber?
Bring him into the chamber.
No, outside the chamber, 6 feet away. 6 feet away. Just want to be open, transparent.
I wish you'd stop.
Unless he needs them.
Yeah, exactly.
Taking over for food, eh?
You must have found those words 2 years ago, didn't you, Jason?
Okay, sir. So, Mr.
Okay with that, Richard?
Yep, Mr. Kelly read the resolution. Any questions?
Questions called?
Questions called? Okay, all those in favor, please raise your hands.
Just have a question.
On the resolution? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
Richard's here for any answers, right, Richard?
Maybe not, Mr. Gill. In terms of the infrastructure, the work that is yet to be completed, will this be the final phase?
Yes.
Or will there be additional work done? And by approving this resolution, does that mean this will include all of the infrastructure necessary to complete this project?
Your Worship, yes.
Yes.
This is the final piece.
For the tower, your communications tower, yeah.
And just
Can
follow up,
you, Mr. Councilor Twitt, can you raise just so we can get it on the mic? Can you rise?
I got a bad back, so I'm going to sit.
Oh, it's a bad back. Oh,
So that's okay with you.
Sure.
So, all the previous deficiencies, have they been corrected, Richard?
The project is not yet complete.
I'm sorry?
The project is not yet complete.
Is that all right, sir? Okay, let's call the question again. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Councilor Duran?
In favor?
Okay, so that's 9-0, and Councilor Bernard is absent. And Mr. Kelly, do you want to bring the next one?
Yes, Your Worship. Your Worship, moved by Councilor McLeod, second by Councilor Duffy, that as per the conditions of the public tender for the Northridge Parkway lighting replacement, change order number 1 in the amount of $14,611 plus all applicable taxes be accepted, Your Worship.
Okay. It's Paul Brooks. Okay, sir?
I just have a question.
Yes. Okay, Councilor Yankoff, can you just rise to speak there?
Certainly.
Your back's all right? Yeah, here's the other one right here.
This was,
Keep shy.
this was additional money that needed to be added after, we already approved this resolution. Is this additional money? Right.
Yes.
Is this right?
Yes.
And so what happened, because I remembered in the last meeting, although I'm very much in support of this project, and I stated I wasn't at the time, we had asked, are we sure that covers all of the money needed for the project? So now we're back with another 14. Of course, I'm going to support it, but I'm just a bit perplexed that this was missed. And maybe the manager of Public Works can speak to that.
The chair is here.
Chair is here.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Councillor Yankoff, for your question. I hate to say the word operational, but unfortunately, this is one of these situations where once they get into the project, the scope of it changed. As they get into the drill work, they realized that there had to be additional conduit and space provided to give the lights more of an effect. And I can't actually say what exactly what happened. I do know that unfortunately once this project gets started and something like this, it's kind of hard not to go back. But it's unfortunate, but I can't say for sure whether it's an oversight or. But it looks just like it's one of these projects that when you get into it, all of a sudden they notice that this is part of the problem. So it's either you stop it all or you're trying to go forward. So if the council wishes to move forward, we will. If not,
Councilor Yankoff, just on the back sign, there is an actual drilling issue.
it's a drilling issue.
Oh, no, I read it all,
Yeah.
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 No, I read it all, yeah.
Councilor Twitt?
I'll be supporting the project, but as I said at our last meeting, these particular light fixtures, I think we need to look at a citywide plan to have these old-fashioned lanterns being installed particularly the historic part of the city. I did mention Upper Prince Street. There's no street in this city more historic than Upper Prince Street, and that's one that I think I wanted to bring forward. But I do think we need a plan. These particular light fixtures should not just be installed in downtown or another section of the city. We have tremendous older neighborhoods in this city that I sincerely believe, would really benefit from having this type of a feature, this kind of an infrastructure. So I want to bring that forward, and I hope that we'll have money set aside in the capital budget, and we can look at the Upper Prince Streets as a prime example. Thank you.
Councilor McLeod, did you just want to answer to that, please?
Yes, so thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks, Councilor Trillo, for your question. And just to add to that, you know, from a public works perspective, you know, we don't say where they go, of course. But at the same time, one option too would be environment and sustainability, like solar. Like, let's look into that as to, you know, maybe we could save, the city could save money by not having to lay so much infrastructure and drill work if we had some lights that were capable of handling with solar, because that would definitely make a big difference in the cost and be able to do more areas. Just something that for you to go back to your committee with.
Send that back to environment sustainability.
We're certainly open to exploring all of those options and all those opportunities. Absolutely. But I think the point that has to be made is that infrastructure of this nature, this magnitude, needs to be done on a citywide basis, equitably, fairly, so that all residents can have that benefit of having these old-fashioned lanterns in their respective neighborhoods, especially the historic parts of the city.
Thank you, Councilor Tweed. Councilor McKay.
Yep, so I didn't
Could you
support
please
this last
stand and
time.
just- you have the floor.
But I
Thank
am
you.
going to support the $15,000 we're already into the project, of course. But for me, it's infrastructure that, you know, we're waiting for an answer from Public Works on the cost comparison between regular versus heritage lights. And heritage lights are pretty, I agree.
Yeah.
Personally, I want sidewalks, or I want active, safe trails for my residents to walk in versus spending extra money on prettiness. So for me, it would be about where do we need to do for the betterment of every ward and every part of the city.
Question?
Thank you.
Question, Colin?
Yeah.
Questions called?
Okay, all those in favor, please put up your hand. Councilor Duran, yea or nay?
Yes.
Yea?
Yes.
Okay, 9-0. And Councilor Bernard, absent. Okay, Mr. Kelly, the next issue is
I
reconsideration
have to
of
leave, Your Worship.
18 Trainer Street,
I have
and
conflict.
Councilor Ramsey has to leave because he's in conflict. His
Son-in-law.
son-in-law works with the owner of the development.
Who?
With the owner of the development, Chris Wenzel. What's Chris's last name? Waddell, Chris Wenzel Waddell. Okay,
Waddell?
yeah, Lenzel Waddell.
Any listener Don Waddell?
And no, Paulette Waddell is the mother. Is his mother. Okay, Alex, do you want to, an opportunity just to address the council? And did you want to go first, Mr.?
Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction.
Alex, do you mind if the council goes first? and you
Yeah,
follow?
I think we agreed to it beforehand.
Sorry. That's-
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, council members. I would like to welcome Mr. Forbes tonight and our manager of our planning department, planning and heritage department, and Mr. Hooley, our city solicitor, in the other corner. Just a short introduction as to why we're here this evening. Back on June the 8th of 2020, council approved an application to consolidate a lot with a portion of a second lot in the subdivision known as Southwest Estates. On June the 29th, a request was made by a resident of Southwest Estates for City Council to reconsider the decision of June 8th. On November the 9th, 2020, this City Council granted that request. The purpose of this evening's meeting is not to rehash the approval that was granted on June the 8th. The purpose of this meeting is to examine statements that have been made by residents that have led them to believe the council has erred in their approval on June the 8th. Mr. Forbes will address those statements one at a time, and Mr. Hooley is also available to answer any questions that may be provided. Before I turn the mic over to Mr. Forbes, I'd like to end by advising this evening that members of council will be asked to decide on one of three choices. First choice is they can confirm the decision of council on June the 8th. They can rescind or reverse the decision of June the 8th, or kind of a middle-of-the-road type of approach. They can vary the decision by considering additional items and conditions to alter the previous decision. It's important to note that we wished for everyone who makes a decision grounds their decision in either the zoning and development bylaws or the official plan.
Correct.
Okay, Mr. Hooley is here to consider those things, because this may be going on to IRAC, and as we know, I know it's not a popular thing, but as we know, the planning officer has suggested or recommended back on June the 8th that the slot consolidation be approved. I know there's people that don't go along with that. We've been asked time and time again by the IRAC people that if you disagree with the development officer, you should state your reason, your rationale, or your logic for that particular decision. I'd also like to remind members of council that back on December the 6th of 2018, we took an oath of office where we said basically, I shall diligently, faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability perform the duties of office imposed by the Municipal Government Act and all other acts, regulations, and bylaws applicable to the city, town, or municipality. I do hereby further solemnly swear that I will abide by the Municipal Government Act and regulations and all other acts, regulations, and bylaws for so long as I hold this office. So vote the way you want, folks, but make sure your reasoning or rationale for casting your vote in that manner is grounded, as I say, in the bylaws or in the plan. With that, Your Worship, I'd like to turn the mic over
We have to go to Mr. Forbes first. But just hold on, just 1 second. So, Councillor Duffy,
yes.
When I look at the email, the package, confirm its decision of June 8, 2, rescind or reverse its decision, or 3, vary its decision. Like, I think all we're looking at is either to vote yay or nay on the reconsideration time, correct?
No, right out of the bylaw is given these three options available to council. Right. So it's yay or nay, or somewhere in between, which would be varying its decision by adding terms and conditions in to the way the resolution of June the 8th read at the time.
But
and I defer to Mr. Forbes or Mr. Hooley.
But a council could put a resolution on the floor to go with number 2, to rescind.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Councillor Tweel, did you want to?
Yeah, I do have a question for the Chair of Planning. You read out the
oath of office.
The oath of office.
Yes.
Can you please clarify why you read that out, sir?
To remind people that you were supposed to be upholding the bylaws and of the city of Sherrilltown. You swore to on December the 6th of 2018. And it's the bylaws, the zoning and development bylaw that we're considering here tonight. There is some for street access, I understand that, but basically, if you're going to make a decision to either one of those three actions there, you better have your rationale or your logic rooted in the zoning and development bylaw. You just can't pull it out of the air and say, this is my reason for which has nothing to do with zoning and development bylaw.
No, just 1 second. Councillor Rivard, could you please stand?
Thank you.
Just one minute. Let him go first.
Councillor Duffy, while I appreciate that, council can speak freely. Council can offer reasons for refusing or supporting something. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be tied to the bylaw. It can be, we are elected by the residents of Charlottetown, so we can speak freely. Does it hold any weight in Iraq? Maybe not in this appeal, but we can certainly speak freely and offer reasons that may not be attached to the bylaws if we so choose. So I just want to be very clear that we can absolutely, and we have done that for the last 6 years of council.
Mr. Louis just wants to add an opinion there, Councillor Schweel.
Just
make sure you get close enough to the mic.
Close enough to the mic so it's picking me up.
I want to make sure you record.
Just to be clear, in a number of recent decisions, Iraq has stated in fairly unequivocal terms that, it's fine for council to make a decision within their authority, which is, not in accord, say, with the recommendations from staff. That you have the final word. However, if you do make a decision which is, different from what staff are recommending, if you don't state, a rationale, logic, reasons, which are rooted either in bylaws and the official plan, or are rooted in good planning principles, then Iraq is not going to show any deference to your decision, and they may well quash your decision. So it's just that it should be, to paraphrase what Councillor Duffy was saying, if your decision is not rooted in the bylaws, the plan, and good planning principles, then that decision may be quashed. That's all.
I agree, but my point is the councillor can feel free to say what they would like, even if it's not, if they're risking.
Right.
It going to.
You're free to say it, it's just that your decision
That's my point.
may not be upheld by Iraq.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can't get in trouble for your own
No.
opinion or interpretation.
No, you're not gonna go to jail.
Exactly. Good clarification.
Councillor Twill?
Well, I don't know, I guess I'm at a loss. When you vote your conscience, right? You take all the information, you analyze it, you arrive at a conclusion. Lots of times, you vote on a resolution, a planning issue, or whatever the issue may be, and even if you're not the majority, you still vote. And as Mr. Hooley tested, it ends up over in Iraq, and then you find some of these decisions being overturned. So you can stand up here and you can give an Abraham Lincoln speech as to why you don't support a resolution coming forward from the planning board or any other department for that matter. And it's the majority that carries. So even when you do elaborate as to why, for example, in a hypothetical situation, you might support the residents over a particular development because the development might not blend into the community. It's not a balanced approach to development. We've done that in a number of cases, but lots of times no avail because the majority carries, and then the residents have to take it a step further and ends up over in Iraq. So I'm not sure if I read the oath of office. I mean, I take my oath of office extremely seriously.
Congratulations.
Pardon me?
Congratulations.
Congratulations, but I don't think we need to be lectured. With all due respect.
Councillor Twill, I don't think there was a lecture there.
Well, I don't know what it is.
No.
I don't know.
Just let me finish. We let you finish.
Yeah.
But you know what, Councillor Duffy, I don't think it was a lecture. I think you just reminded councillors, including the mayor and council, the oath that we took, that we are here to protect and ensure that we follow the bylaws that we passed or were previously passed by previous councils and mayors and ratified by the province. So I understand where he's coming from, but just as you said, Councillor Tweed, you're going to give up. If you vote for it or against it, you can give your reasons to state why you did it or why you didn't vote for it. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Tweel, we've been advised on numerous occasions by Iraq that this is the way they would like to see business done. They've been told by the Supreme Court of Canada, it's been reiterated here tonight by the city solicitor, you can do what you want, but I'm just, as the mayor says, reminding people that these people down, our friends down the block here, have reminded us time and time again, when you're going not to be in concert with the development officer to provide a rationale. And when they say a rationale, I would imagine a rationale that is grounded in some sort of document, whatever. Thank you, Your Worship.
No, you've already spoken twice.
Clarification.
Want a clarification? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, well, before it was down to Iraq, there's also reconsideration.
That's what we're doing here tonight.
Well, no, that's the point I'm trying to make. Okay, we're going through the exercise. So there's also the reconsideration process as well.
Yeah.
So before it even goes to Iraq, council has a second sober thought, whether it's second reading or the reconsideration at the request of the residents. So again, you can give all the reasons under the sun. It's the majority carries, and that's why a lot of those decisions ended up down in Iraq. I mean,
okay.
how many decisions, I think, with all due respect, I think we've broken the Guinness Book of Records with all the decisions that have gone down to Iraq.
Thank you.
Okay,
So can we allow Mr. Forbes to, is that all right, Chair?
That's fine, thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Forbes?
Thank you, Your Worship. So you have your package there that you've received. It's a relatively extensive package. I'm just going to hit the highlights. Again, it's really the first 10 pages that gives the real overview of what's transpired on here. The attachments are fairly extensive, which really increase the size of the document, but it's important that you folks have everything in front of you prior to making your decision. I would point out that under the attachments, there's a reference in the report about attachment B being the land use buffer versus the landscaped area. The landscape buffer is actually attachment E, so I just thought I would clarify that. The chair has gone over the decision making that's available to you folks tonight. I'm just going to give us a high-level overview of the property. The property in question is zoned highway commercial C2 and has been zoned thus since 1995, back in the days of West Royalty. Apartment buildings and townhouses are permitted uses in the C2 zone, and the purpose of the consolidation request is to assemble the land to construct 3 mixed-use buildings with a combination of townhouses and apartment units in each building, 20 units per building, so that for a total of 60 units. The C2 zone allows for a variety of commercial uses as well, which may not be compatible with the low-density residential neighborhoods such as Katy Drive and Traynor Street. And from a land use perspective, multi-unit residential is not generally located immediately adjacent to low-density residential buildings. However, given that the land has been for over 25 years zoned highway commercial, multi-unit residential generates less traffic, is more compatible with low-density residential uses, and would present less land use conflicts than some of the uses that are presently permitted in C2 zone. So again, the apartment and townhouse buildings would provide a stepped zoning approach and a buffer between the low-density units in the adjacent neighborhood, and is less intensive than the commercial use that's allowed in the highway commercial zone, again, which is adjacent to this particular neighborhood. There were a number of issues that were brought up by the residents. All of the residents' issues are attached. All of this has been reviewed. The reconsideration was a review process there. There's some feedback from the public, as well as the recent meeting that we had, the public meeting here at City Hall. One of the issues that's been raised is an illegal access onto Traynor Street. Staff have looked at this issue, and to determine there was a suggestion that the access was illegal, and that there had been some history on this in the past, where that access had been reviewed by the city and deemed to be illegal. Staff have looked through our records and were able to find any evidence to support that this was indeed the case. The police chief was also consulted, who's been around here certainly a lot longer than I, and he has no recollection of any enforcement issues at this location. And the former property owner, Mr. Hancock, now living in Nova Scotia, was contacted, and he had no recollection of the city ever advising him orally or in writing that the existing access was illegal and could not be used. And the same goes for the current owner, which was Mr. Chris Daly. So again, there's some issues in there in regard to access, some legal, precedent that was established through court cases. But as far as staff are concerned, the existing access appears to be clearly legal at or before the building permit stage. Pursuant to the street access bylaw, the developer will require approval of staff to intensify the use of the proposed 3 new apartment buildings. The other issue that was that came through loud and clear from the residents was the issue of the land use buffer, and a series of arguments were made with regard to the land use buffers. In particular, a land use buffer is, and that is the attachment E, and I would suggest that you look at that as to how they actually work in relation to this property. In the wording in 6.2 is clear and unambiguous. A land use buffer is only required to be constructed along a lot line of a multi-unit residential building where this is the operative words, where it abuts the R1L zone. So attachment E indicates where that buffer needs to be erected on this entire site. So but the frontage on Trainer Street, it does not apply to that. There was some concerns that some arguments made about the zone boundary. The zone boundary doesn't come into play here. The zone boundary is a tool used when you can't determine exactly where the property line is. Clearly, we understand where the property boundary is in this case. So therefore, again, staff have reviewed this a couple of times. It was reviewed the last time that it was at in front of council as part of the reconsideration. All three staff members have reviewed this, and we disagree with the interpretation of that. Therefore, we don't regard that as an issue. The other issue that came up was that the proposed 320-unit apartment building is not compatible with the official plan. Again, we relate to the fact that the official plan, in some cases, there's a number of different policies in the official plan, and sometimes they may appear to be conflict, but it is a balancing act and a bit of a judgment call as to what is the best application of our plan policies in relation to any development. And so we've gone through that as well. So in staff's opinion, this development proposal is consistent with the official plan because the zoning applied to this property reflects a land use that was in existence prior to the residential area that grew up around it. This is an old property in the city. It's been commercial for a long time. So this is not the only situation in the city where residential land use abuts a commercial property. It is the city that designates land use zones in the city, and as a result, development rights are attributed to the zoning applied to the individual properties within the city. So there are development rights that are applied to the commercial property that the applicant is trying to exercise. Ideally, there is some form of transition from a commercial property to a lower density property or residential area. The present application allows the city to introduce a compatible higher density residential use mitigated by a land use buffer, which is intended to resolve a long-standing issue between these two potentially conflicting land uses, and that's low density residential and a number of commercial uses that are permitted in the C1 zone. But I guess what and I think from all of the discussion you've heard from the residents, the primary concern, I think, from the residents is traffic, and the traffic concerns from the additional traffic that will be exiting on the Trainer from these apartments. The collective belief that the increase in traffic is possibly going to be an issue. I mean, we do hear that a lot in a lot of applications dealing with development. It does change things when the street is intensified with a more intensive land use. And their concern had to do with not only traffic but property values. But staff would contend that I think those that are on the planning board, they hear that at pretty well every application. And we do take that into consideration. And so we did ask for a traffic study, and CBCL prepared a traffic study. And again, they looked at this issue in detail as to what would be the impacts from traffic exiting from the proposed development if the lot consolidation was provided onto Trainer Street, and that was reviewed. The traffic engineers who prepared it are professional traffic engineers. When we're at IRAC on this case or any case, the issue is when professionals that are trained to apply their methodology to a certain traffic analysis or to prepare something to model what will occur. The issue is that if you do have a concern, you need more than anecdotal evidence that you feel that there could be problems associated with it. Again, the residents noted a number of concerns that they thought or deficiencies in the report. Staff went through that, and neither the planning staff nor the city's police chief or the public works directors have any material concerns with the efficacy of the CBCL report. So again, the report is in your package at the back. It's fairly extensive. It's also been suggested that the access for the 60 proposed units ought to instead be to Malpeque Road. But the problem with that is a major arterial highway. This option had been investigated by staff in relation to earlier development proposals for lands, including the subject property. The province owns and controls the bypass arterial highway and the Malpeque Road running north of that. which is not directly in front of this property, but the city owns and controls the Malpec Road south of the bypass arterial highway, which is in front of the subject property, this commercial property. The long-standing existing accesses for the Royalty Maples cottages directly onto the Malpec Road, not far south of the bypass arterial highway, is the only access that exists there now. And when we're dealing with a situation like this, when you have an access close to the provincial infrastructure that has a lot of turning lanes and things there, we consult with them. There's a term called area of influence. For those that recollect the Tim Hortons application, the roundabout was also area of influence beside a local street. So we do consult with the province. And the province, it's not the province's decision, but they indicate to us what their position would be to us, and so we work very closely with them. So their indication is that if it was their infrastructure, and their recommendation to us would be that they would not support the intensification of the access at that section of Malpec Road. That section of Malpec Road may be changed in the future. There may be a barrier down the middle of that, which will impact any future access from that site. And again, this issue, Mr. Adams is also aware of it, and he concurs with the province's assessment that that is a very significant access point there that needs to be looked at for any intensification because of the ramifications for traffic in front of this property. The other issue, and this has come up in a previous application, but the Transportation Association of Canada, they're the ones that deal with traffic engineering, road design, just as a point of principle regarding access to and from collection road streets. They go, if a development is bordered by two roads of different classification, access should be to the lower classification road. That's the local street, and the local street in this case is Traynor. Therefore, for the proposed development, the access should be directed to Traynor Street, which again is the lower classification than the Malpec Road. And I'm just going to a few more comments, Your Worship, and I'll be finished. But there are existing development rights that are applied to this property. What we're discussing here tonight is not the use of the property. We're discussing a lot consolidation. So again, the property owner has two separate lots. In the event that council rescinds the lot consolidation approval, it should be noted that this does not preclude the developer from requesting building permits with proposals to build apartment units on either lot. Under this scenario, the proposals would be reviewed as typical building permit applications, and provided the proposals adhere to all of the requirements of the zoning bylaw and the street access bylaw, permits would be issued. With the proposed lot consolidation under review at council, staff expressly requested, when this was dealt with back in June and council was deliberating on it and making their decision, I interjected with the mayor at that time, and I indicated if you were to approve this, that I would highly suggest that a development agreement put in place, and that the development agreement was requested to restrict the access from this residential, the 3-unit apartment buildings to Traynor Street to those 60 units only, and not allow any other development from the front parcel, which is the commercial point, which we think would conflict more with the activities on Traynor Street, and that was to be integrated into the development agreement. Without the development agreement in place, it is more difficult to restrict the access to Traynor Street as it relates to the larger piece of property fronting on Malpec Road, which we know has restrictions on its ability to increase its land use activities to get out at that location. So, and I would just point out, this pertains to both commercial and multi-residential development rights that apply to this property as well. So again, there was some rationale there as to why the development agreement was asked for back in June, and it was to clearly articulate that that would be the only, the 60 units would be the only amount of residential traffic or any traffic from that entire site to exit onto Traynor Street. So, in conclusion, staff are confident that the CBCL traffic report, as it pertains to the residential apartment buildings with access off of Traynor Street, presents an accurate reflection of traffic impacts to the local street network from this proposal. And just at the end, I indicate that one of the third options was, and I'm not sure what may what would be applicable, but I just put in the report, if council feels that additional terms and conditions could reasonably be applied to this development to mitigate the concerns of residents, staff would be willing to advise on the ability to legally impose such terms and conditions. And that's my report, Your Worship, and then the three options are in your report. I'm here to answer.
Thank you. And just one point of clarification. TAC, which is the Transportation Association of Canada.
Right.
They only provide guidelines.
They are guidelines,
Yeah,
but
so they're not stringent, they're not similar to the National Building Code where it's codified. These are just guidelines.
Right.
Can I go with Councilor McCall? Just let her go first, please.
I had my hand up before I finished talking.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No, Councilor McCall.
Anyway, I
Just
did. Thank you.
please
Thank
stand
you, Your
there.
Worship. Okay.
Thank you.
I need a point of clarification because there was a lot there, a lot of information. Did you say that apartments usually aren't on C2 zone, land zone, that not normally this close to residential? Did you say that initially at the first year report there? Can you explain that?
The issue here is that you've got a C2 zone,
Yeah.
well, which has been there historically,
Yes.
and the neighborhood has moved around it.
Yeah.
In the suite of uses allowed in the C2 zone, we feel the most compatible use is the residential. So they're asking for the residential to be abutted up against the residential development or the residential neighborhood there on Trainer Street. So it's the commercial that we feel is going to create the conflicts. And we felt that as a part of this lot consolidation, this is the opportunity to allow those apartment units to go in, which are residential, adjacent to residential, and basically kind of create a wall at the rear of these apartment units to not allow any other traffic from the commercial portion to get out to Trainer Street. So typically high-density residential is on the periphery of a residential area. So we feel that in this scenario that is a reasonable application of not only use but the compatibility with the adjacent neighborhood.
Councilor Trail.
Thank you. Are you done, Jim?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You referenced 2 or 3 people that you went back and did some additional research with. One gentleman who has sent me numerous emails was Councilor Ken Gillis, representing the ward, and he offered his knowledge and his history that were issued. Would you care to reference what Ken Gillis said?
I think Mr. Gillis,
He was the former councilor.
Right. Yeah, he's contesting, and again, I wasn't here, but he's claiming that possibly, I think during his time as the councilor in that ward, that the property owner was told that there was restrictions applied to that access on Trainer Street.
Right.
So the city solicitor and myself, he didn't provide any great details as to who he spoke to or what the circumstance was, but he did reference that. We reviewed this the last time this was at council. The issue is that if you're going to restrict anything, you need the powers to restrict something. To say you cannot have this use. We do presently now have a new street access bylaw, but that didn't exist at the time that Mr. Gillis was on council. It's only recently that we have a street access bylaw. And that street access bylaw is primarily to deal with restricting access on the Malpeque roadside because that's a limited access highway. So there's a much stronger review and test to intensify the use of the front portion of this property. So in regard to the former councilor's claims, I wasn't here. I don't know exactly what he was
Do you have any documentation?
We weren't provided anything.
Did you find anything?
No, there was nothing in our
Okay, your
records.
second question, Councilor.
Well, my point was, and I appreciate the presentation,
Right.
and all the different things that you brought up. Alex, I really did. But the reason why I bring up Mr. Gillis, because Mr. Gillis sent a bunch of emails, and we took the time and effort to talk to some of these other individuals to gather as much insight, as much information, and just wondered was there further dialogue with Mr. Gillis, because he was very, very active in this particular issue. He tried to provide as much background and information and try to inform council and the planning department to the best of his ability. I certainly respect his efforts, and because you did outline 3 to 4 individuals that you reached out to, I was wondering if Mr. Gillis was on the roster, whether his points of view were taken into consideration, and if in fact there was further dialogue because of his history working with the people in this particular subdivision.
Well, did you reach out?
Look, we respond to, when people have concerns, they articulate them in their letters, and we review those letters in detail.
Okay, so no further dialogue. I just asked, just to follow up.
Just one second. That's 2 questions.
One quick point on the street that might help clarify. The staff spent, as I understand it, a considerable amount of time trying to find some record of what Mr. Gillis recalled back when he was the councilman of the area.
Yeah.
At the same time as the staff were doing that, Alex had raised with me the legal question of is, well, if that's an illegal road, what would make it illegal? Why, how come it's illegal? So I was having some legal research done. The fruit of the legal research is mentioned in Alex's report, right? And at common law, if you owned property on a public highway, you had an as-of-right access to that public highway. Okay, it was a part of your property rights. That would have been the case in the city of Charlottetown up until 2008. Councilor Gillis was on the council prior to that time. Okay? So it kind of became a moot point, because prior to 2008, the owner of the subject property would have had an as-of-right access to Trainer Street. So it may, imagine it's the case, as Mr. Gillis recalls it, that the city, someone on behalf of the city, said to the former owners, although the owners denied that, they said you can't use that street, it's an illegal street. Okay? They would have been legally incorrect to have said that. So I think at that point we stopped spending additional time chasing down what appeared to be a bit of a rabbit hole, frankly, on this quote illegal street. It appears to us clear that it was legal at the time that it would have come into existence. If the city purported, if you will, to use a legal word, the city had purported to say you can't use that street, it's an illegal street, the city would have been wrong to have said that. After the street access bylaw, it's a different story. But this was, as we understood it, Alex, it had happened back in, I guess, the early 2000s or whatever. So
Can you
given the legality of it became, if you will, a moot point, a red herring.
Alex, do you just want to add something?
Just quickly,
Councilor Roberta.
Right. It's just on the issue of an illegal street. I think what they're referring to is an illegal access point to the street. There's no street in this application. It's just an access to the development to a street. So again, just wanted to clarify. Sometimes things get bandied around an illegal street, or the contention is it's a legal access to Trainer Street. Thank you.
Councilor Yankoff, did I skip? Did you want to?
I'm good for now.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilor Roberta, could you just stand and
Thank you.
ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Duffy, of course, just to touch on Mr. Hooley's comments around access onto streets. So I get the whole access onto Trainer Street being a public street, but I guess it begs the question of why are we being told that it's not permitted to have access onto our other public street, which is Malpeck Road, I guess it is. So both owned by the city, both a public street. Access is allowed to one, but why is access not allowed to the other? That's all. I just need clarification.
Did you want to answer?
I can answer it. David can jump in as well.
Let him answer first. Quickly, let him answer first.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, well, it's just a matter of it goes to, Mr. Hooley's point. In 2008, we brought in the street access bylaw, and it laid out in detail, when you're dealing with a limited access roadway, they're the most sensitive roadways in the city, and they tend to be out around where you get the most amount of traffic. The issue is it's the way that Malpeck Road intersects with the arterial highway. There's a lot of provincial infrastructure that's been put in there, and the contention is that's going to expand. So there literally can be a barrier right down in front of this property, and they don't want more intensification coming out. Whether that doesn't mean that they didn't say any intensification, but there was discussion on this before about whether that traffic could be diffused out onto
and went on to our roadway. So we would have had to have sent that to the police committee under the bylaw, which is limited access bylaw. We would have done up a report. We would have indicated we spoke to the province, and the province were indicating similar to the Tim Hortons application. It was very close to the provincial infrastructure, and they had concerns. That's not their decision, but they would have notified us of what their opinion on that was if we were to intensify that use.
Mr. Hoon, can you give a legal sign?
Just very briefly, Councilor Bernard, prior to 2008, the city didn't have any provisions which regulated access or intensification of an existing access. The province did under the Roads Act and Roads Act regulations. In 2008, when the city brought in that bylaw, the purpose was to give the city a similar regulatory regime to get around this common law rule that you had an as-of-right access, and give the city some ability to regulate that activity. So it's access is one thing, intensification of that particular access is another thing. And in both cases, under the street access bylaw, the city now regulates that activity. If it's not a collector or an arterial road, say it's a local street, then that's dealt with at the staff level. If it's access that's requested or intensification of access onto a collector or arterial road, that would go to the committee.
Deputy Mayor, did you want to say something?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the report. I just want to touch on the traffic study. I won't spend a lot of time on it. I find it kind of ironic. I've only been asking for 6 or 7 months plus the residents to see this report, and then lo and behold, the 11th hour it shows up in a 200-page email. But anyway, on page 2 of that report, it said COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the peak period traffic volumes, and traffic counts couldn't be obtained at this time. So what they did, they used data from 2017, 2019 in March. You know, some of that data is 4 years old to construct this traffic study. Just think in the last 4 years, how many apartment buildings have we approved just on Malpeck Road, just up the road? To get into town, you got to go by this subdivision. One would have to ask, how long is that data good for? 4-year-old data, that's what you're plugging into a computer program to spit out a report? It's not very accurate. I do want to mention the zoning bylaw section 1.4.4a states where a boundary of any zone is uncertain and the boundary substantially follows a street, lane, or public road of way, then the center line of such feature is the boundary. So streets are not meant to be excluded from zoning. So if the zone boundary line can be down the center line of that street, then streets are intended to be captured within the boundary of a zone. Because section 1.4.4a says that the streets are intended to be captured within the boundaries and the zone, and because 100% of the Trainer Street was built inside the residential zone, and because the commercial zone boundary has never moved, then we know that the boundary line between the R1 zone and the C2 zone is where the commercial lot abuts Trainer Street. And that's where this land use buffer comes in. That's section 6.6.2 that we've been discussing, is to separate incompatible land zones. And that's what we have here. We have commercial and we have residential. That's where that comes from. So it's kind of ironic we're sitting here talking about IRAC and we've got a state decisions and it goes to IRAC. So I went and looked at 2 IRAC decisions. One very recent. The order LA 20-04, better known as Palmer's Lane. So in that decision, if you go and read it, the comments are, it's not appropriate for the neighborhood because of the existing character of the neighborhood. The main issue remains the shifting of higher density zone into an existing low density, mature neighborhood. This conflicts with the primary objective of section 3.2 of our official plan, which states, our objective is to preserve the built form and density of Charlottetown's existing neighborhoods and to assure that new development is harmonious with its surroundings. So if you go back a little further, 2016, and you look at another IRAC decision, order LA 17-08, Pinecone Development, where they asked to have a building permit and the city said no. The city planners at IRAC had mentioned the official plan requires new development to be physically related to its surroundings in order to be harmonious and to maintain the distinct character of the existing neighborhood. Other issues brought up were bulk scale and the size of the building. These design features relate to harmony and compatibility. And that's what we have here. We have an established residential neighborhood, and we're trying to jam 3 20-unit apartment buildings in there. It's not harmonious, it's not compatible. We just went through the East Royalty Master Plan. We looked at it, we were trying to find mirror images of zones. If there's townhouses, let's have townhouses across the street. If there's semi-detached, let's have semi-detached across the street. We just went through that exercise at East Royalty. We just went through an application on McRae Drive where the developer wanted to put semi-detached on one side of the road across from single family. And this council said, no, we want single family across from single family. And the developer agreed, and that's what we did in East Royalty. But now all of a sudden in Winslow, where we have a residential neighborhood with all single family homes, people there trying to raise their kids, raise their grandkids, we want to stick 3 20-unit apartment buildings in there. It doesn't make any sense. So, Your Worship, I'll end with, this has been a very trying application for the residents. They put a lot of time in, they put a lot of heart and soul into it, and I just wonder if everyone would think that, if you want this on your street or your ward or your neighborhood, I think I know what the answer is, and it's probably no. Thank you, Your Worship.
Do you want to respond? And then I have Councillor Yankoff. Is that all right, Councillor Yankoff? Did you have your hand up, Councillor Rivera?
I will speak after.
Yeah, okay, Councillor. We'll leave it at
Look, staff do not, contest the fact that it has been, very, tumultuous for the residents there. But we're dealing with land use rights that presently exist on that property. Palmer's Lane was a rezoning to take a low density property and intensify the use. Our issue here is that this property is going to develop, and the lot consolidation, and it's up to you folks whatever impacts, but it will develop. And as a result, we will be potentially in a position to be issuing permits, could be very soon thereafter. So we just want you to be clear that the issue tonight is of the lot consolidation and whatever the implications that may be, but the use permissions on that property still exist and will continue to exist.
But the issue tonight is either to sustain or rescind the June 8th decision. Councillor Yankoff.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I made some notes here, so don't
Thank you.
I just want to read them off my phone so I can keep myself clear here. Thank you, Alex, for your report, by the way, Mr. Forbes. So the land use buffer issue, you're right, was well documented, but when I looked through like verbatim excerpts from the bylaw, lot lines are clearly defined in Appendix A of the bylaw and includes the lot line along Traynor Street. All of Traynor Street is clearly part of an R1 zone, and that land use buffer is required as a visual and a spatial barrier along the entire lot line that abuts out onto Traynor Street. So the roads that are not meant to be part of that barrier, or the bylaw that have said so. So instead, it requires a wall, a fence, a water course, or a barrier, not a roadway that has the opposite effect of annexing incompatible zones. So although Mr. Forbes did indicate that the staff disagreed with this interpretation, I don't. I agree with that interpretation that I just read. And in terms of safety, incompatible zones should not be annexed. This is like the purpose of a land use buffer, and I dare say I don't think there's another one in the city, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Forbes. And finally, I also see this as Councillor Deputy Mayor Cody said, I see this as unharmonious development, so therefore I will not be supporting a lot consolidation this evening.
Okay, Councillor Yankoff, when you say unharmonious, are you taking that from the zoning development bylaw or the official plan?
Both.
Councillor Rivera?
Thank you.
Did you want to respond?
Councillor Duffy. So Councillor Cody did touch on what I just jotted a few notes down, and Alex, you're right. You made a comment saying residential uses in the commercial zone. You're right. Is most ideal, and I agree with you. And I think everyone in the room would agree that they would rather a residential use rather than commercial. But I guess that all depends on what the residential looks like and what's being built. And again, it ties back to what Councillor Cody had talked about the official plan. And it says in the official plan The city will have to carefully, you didn't mention this, Alice, thank you, carefully balance its physical, economic, and social needs. In doing so, again, it talks about preserving existing residential, low-density neighborhoods as one of the points in the official plan. And it says, ensure new residential development is physically related to its surroundings. So again, those are two pieces in the official plan. And again, as part of the balancing trick, there probably is things in the official plan that support the stance of planning staff. Again, I'm assuming this is not a slam dunk 100%. This is easy without any argument on the other side because the official plan would support otherwise. So I guess to me, I look back at, again, I did the same thing as Councillor Cody did, Deputy Mayor Cody, sorry. When the decision came down on Pine Drive, and as well as Palmer's, because I do like to refresh myself on those and study those, because you know, as Councillor Duffy said, we do have to have some supporting documentation. In those decisions, it did talk a lot about you know, harmonious developments. It talks about, you know, physically related buildings in the neighborhood. So I mean, again, to me, when I was asked the question by the residents, how is this any different from Pine Drive? For me, with the eye test, you have a property in behind on Pine Drive that is blank, owned by the city. You have residential on the right, residential left, mirrored by residential in front. Take yourself over on Google Maps over to Trainer Drive. In behind, you have commercial, like property right now, and you have residential, and you have residential mirrored. To me, the eye test, there's no difference. Anyways, I digress. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Forbes?
Look, I would just, you got to realize that those official plan policies, and Councilor Rivard is correct, but it says new residential high density should meet that criteria. That's applying to when you're trying to rezone, which is what we tried to do on Palmer Lane. They were trying to rezone, and you would use those policies to talk about new residential development, harmonious and things like that. I guess I just have to make it as clear as I can. This isn't new. They have development rights in the property. So we're not debating whether that density is allowed in there. It's allowed in there, and the lot consolidation is potentially, it's up to you folks as to how you want to handle that. But we're dealing with policies in the plan which are intended to be guidance when you come forward with a new rezoning to introduce an apartment building into a low-density neighborhood. This is a property that's been there for 50, 60 years. The residents moved in around it. The whole premise behind zoning is there to provide stability, and that's why those official plan policies are very critical when you're going to change the zone by the applicant, which is Palmer's Lane. But the issue here is
Pine Cove rezoning?
Palmer's Lane.
Pine Cove development rezoning? Was it?
Well, Pine Cone there's a whole long history on that, which we don't. That's a much more complicated application. Plus, it's in the middle. That was a building in the middle with single-family dwellings on either side. There's a long history on how that occurred. The residents never knew how it was zoned. It was a 5-unit building that went from 5 units to 41, and they kept asking the city how to have. There's a long history on that. But at any rate, just keep in mind the difference between what you're alluding to in the official plan is when somebody's asking to rezone and then planners are going through and asking if it's harmonious. The situation here is, again, development rights applied to that property. It's been there a long time. The residents moved in around it. Most residents checked the zoning map, so the real estate agents checked that. They would have been aware that commercial use was there. And at the end of the day, you have to realize there's a property owner here who has property rights. And so we're just trying to be fair to everyone. But again, I just thought I'd clarify. Thank you, Councilor Rivera.
Second question?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Alex. So again, we talk about development rights for land use. I mean, a perfect example of putting a residential area into a portion of or rezoning would be the McLean subdivision over in the heavy industrial M2 zone. So by adding that subdivision into that zone, you've actually taken away development rights because now you got environmental reviews that take place for uses that are permitted in the M2 zone that may no longer have the same permitted use or the the right to do so because of the fact that they're residential. So they actually lose out their development rights. Is that?
But you got to realize, folks, that when we review any request to, the difference between rezoning and existing zoning. When you're rezoning, we will indicate in any report all of those implications. At the end of the day, you folks will be looking at those reports and saying yea or nay, and we're going to whether you feel that it's improved feedback from the residents, whether it's appropriate to rezone property.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you want to sum up there?
I'd just like to
Councillor
add
Duffy?
that I've been listening to Alex and the various people here.
Do you mind standing, sir?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
I've been listening and absorbing, I think. But I think what Mr. Hooley and Mr. Forbes have been trying to say indirectly is this is a couple of lots, 2 or 3 lots out there that are in a C2 zone, highway commercial. There's many uses that can go in there, many uses. The institutional zone alone, I think, has 22 uses that piggyback as being permitted uses in this zone. And then there's other MUCs kicking around that they can pick out of. I think what Mr. Forbes especially is trying to say is there's people in this room here tonight that think that they're doing a favor for the people that live in the Southwest States area by squashing this lot consolidation. But and this is not a threat or whatever, I'm just bringing it to your forefront that there's a lot of other things that can go in there starting tomorrow morning as a matter of right than 3 different buildings containing a total of 60 units. And there may come a day when you'd say, gee, today we didn't go with that first option. Where are we now? Anyway, I'll leave it at that, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Platt.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks to council for all the comments. It's certainly it's a tough decision on our part because anytime residents are upset, it's concerning. But I kind of have a little bit of a snag with, like, when we decided to put 3 apartment buildings, like, I don't know when these apartment buildings became such a bad thing. We put 3 apartment buildings right beside a gravel pit. Nobody cared about Linden Avenue, Hawthorne, Belmont, Kirkwood, all the way up. Like, all of a sudden, traffic in this particular area is a concern. But, like, my ward has been overwhelmed with traffic, right? And it's progress, unfortunately for me. You can't stop progress. I think I kind of agree with Councilor Duffy is that there could be a lot worse things go into it. And so let's just make sure that we think about that because as I know in my area, man, it's apartment buildings are a nice thing to have besides some of the things that I have. But anyway, I just, and my final word is I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a planner. And, this has become a legal issue. And for me, I'm not a lawyer, but I do respect the staff. He's a professional. We hire a lawyer who's to guide us, and these folks are saying, what we did was and then we took the concerns of the residents, and they've answered those. So I'm having an awful hard times, changing the vote to June 8th. But anyway, I just thought I'd give my 2 cents. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Okay, let's go to the options. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'm going to put an option on the floor. I don't have it in front of me.
Confirm its decision of June 8th, 2020. Second, rescind or reverse its decision of June 8th, 2020.
I'm putting a motion on the floor.
To rescind decision of June 8th. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councillor Tweel. Okay. Have we had enough discussion? Questions called? Okay, all those in favor to rescind the decision of June 8th, 2020, please put up your hands. Councillor Duran, yea or nay? Yea or nay?
In favor.
Okay, so can you just put your hands? Okay, just put your hands up again. Councillor Tweel, Councillor Yankov, Councillor Rivard, Councillor McCabe, Deputy Mayor Cody, Councillor Duran, in favor to rescind. Those against to rescind. Councillors McLeod and Duffy in favor to rescind. The motion carries. Do you have a resolution for that, or do we need a resolution?
It's already done, Your Worship, but my motion and recorded, so if you wish, we can have one.
Resolution, can you move to second?
Yeah. Good. Okay, can we move on? Candy Games payment plan?
Yes, Your Worship, we should call Councillor Ramsey back in the room, Your Worship, quite quickly.
He's probably in there having a drink of pop. Watching it on TV. You don't need- Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for services.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks, David. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Yeah, don't want to forget the laptop. Laptop would be 18 pounds. Do you want to read the resolution, Mr. Kelly? Thank you, David.
Yes, Your
Good
Worship.
evening, David.
Your Worship, moved by Councillor Ramsey, sent by Councillor Rivard, that the City of Charlottetown enter into a formal municipal partnership agreement with 2023 Canada Games Host Society, Inc. And further, that the partnership agreement clearly state that the city's contribution will be $1.8 million, which will be paid in 3 equal installments. The installments being paid at the end of January 2021, January 2022, and January 2023, with the first installment being approved to be paid by the end of January 2021, and the subsequent installments being approved for payment as per the partnership agreement, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Rivard. Any questions? Councillor Twill.
Thank you. And that was, those payments and financial contribution is due to the fact that size for a municipality.
It's $50 per head.
Compared to the size, say, Summerside, for example. And the presentations that were made, it's really nothing to do with facilities. Although there are some. The strict, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Kelly. It's operational.
It's a cash contribution towards the game's operation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it comes out of general budget, right, sir?
No, that's fine, just operational.
You're all right? Okay,
Yeah.
good. Question called?
Questions called, Your Worship.
All those in favor, please raise your hands. Councillor Duran, yea or nay?
Yay.
Okay, 9-0. And Councillor Bernard, absent. Mr. Kelly, I think we have to go into a closed session.
Yes, Your Worship.
So if anyone that's watching live stream, we're going to close session and come back to an open session just to adjourn the meeting. I don't know how long that will be. Councillor Twill.
Thank you. The biggest concern I have is that you want to entertain a motion to go to a closed door session regarding the fire station design.
That's closed, sir. That's the agenda that you're talking about. That's the
This
reason.
question I have.
Yeah, but it's still an open session.
No, the question I have is, why do we have to go to a closed door session?
It's section 119, subsection 1F. Mr. Kelly, what is 1F?
Somebody explain it to
With
me why.
regards to a legal issue that was raised, Your Worship, that we just want to provide council with clarity.
So it's a legal matter, and that's why we're using, is it section 119, subsection 1F, Mr. Kelly?
I don't have it here, Your Worship, but
Yes.
I believe you're correct.
So that's the,
I'm sorry, so it's a legal matter.
Yes, sir. That's one. Okay, do we have someone to move that, please? Counselor Rivard, second by Counselor Duffy. All those in favor? Raise your hand. Okay. Counselor Drawn, yea or nay? Counselor Drawn?
In favor.
Thank you.
In favor.
Thank you very much. We're just going into closed session. You don't mind if I just go get a drink of water?